Welcome to Outdrive, folks. I'm your host, Cliff Callis, and each week I'm bringing you actionable marketing insights you can apply to reach, connect with, and convert rural American consumers. Outdrive is powered by Callis, a full-service advertising agency with a focus on marketing rural America. Callis offers a wide range of integrated marketing services, including website development, search engine marketing, social media, video, and digital. We develop strategic and creative campaigns to build your brand and your business, and you can learn more about us at ecallis.com. Now join me in the front seat as we head out on the road to success. Let's go. Hey folks, welcome to Outdrive. We've got another great story to share with you today about life and work in rural America. Out here in the country, people take care of each other. They know their neighbors and they value the relationships they have with them. They also know that sometimes people need a helping hand, and there are challenges that many people face as they steer their way through life. In our community, there are many organizations that are working to help people deal with some of these challenges, whether they be financial, health-related, or educationally focused. One such organization is United Way of Pettis County, which brings people and resources together to serve those in need. Sometimes it's through their own innovative programs delivered by volunteers. Other times it's through grant making that helps fund the work of other crucial organizations. In both, collaboration is key, and that brings us to our guest today. Rachelle Simon is the Executive Director of United Way of Pettis County. Rachelle grew up in our community, ventured away to study and work in a variety of settings, including counseling, higher education, nonprofit, and religious ministry. She then returned to rural Missouri to share her talents and experience with us on a local level. When you talk with her, you feel her passion for what she's doing to better the lives of others. And I'm pleased to have Rachelle on the podcast today. Welcome to Outdrive, Rachelle.
Hello. Thank you for letting me be here, Cliff. It's wonderful.
Great. I'm excited to visit with you and learn about what you're doing. And I think we have a lot to talk about. You know, I'm familiar with United Way. I've supported it for many, many years, but I think there's a lot of people out there that may not fully understand everything that you do for our community and our region. So we'll get to that in a minute, but let's start with having you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Well, like you said, my name is Rachelle Simon. I'm the Executive Director of the United Way of Pettis County. I grew up here, so I went to Sacred Heart and grew up in Dresden and just west of town on Old Main Street. And after I graduated, I went to Rockhurst in Kansas City and really have spent the last 16 years or so working and learning at different colleges in the areas of higher education, counseling, ministry, and the nonprofit world. And so it wasn't until March of this year that I made an intentional decision to come back, and it's been wonderful. So I started this job in March. I've been living here since and really enjoy spending time with my family. I have a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles and different folks in the community. And so it's been just a real joy to be back and be able to spend more time with them and get to know Sedalia and Pettis County as middle-aged adult, right? Which when the last time I left, I was 18. So it's kind of with new eyes, I'm seeing it and appreciating it, and it's been really great.
So looking back over the last few years, what's changed with Sedalia and Pettis County?
Yeah, I've really been thinking about this question a lot. So I was glad you asked because there's some things that are the same, but I would say a lot has changed, right? There's been a lot of growth and expansion in different areas that I've noticed. Obviously, west of town, sort of the movie theater used to be the last thing, and now there's a lot west of town. The schools have really expanded, right? The high school and the new gym at Sacred Heart, and I know State Fair has so many more programs than it did when I was here 20 years ago. There's also been a real change in housing. So when I was in high school, I know my aunt, she bought a house and it was affordable. It was a small house that was affordable for her. And I really, in talking to different folks, we've lost a lot of those smaller homes that are more affordable for people. A lot of apartments have gone up. Every time I came back to visit, I would ask my parents, wow, so many new apartments and so many fast food places are kind of popping up. And so I noticed that over the years as well. And I would say with that growth, I noticed our population in many ways has stayed the same. And so I think that paired with a lot of other things has made in talking to various business owners and employers, staffing, has been hard for people. And again, there's many reasons that that is, but I would say those are kind of the things that I'm hearing in the community that are maybe things that have changed and maybe areas of improvement are housing and staffing. And so, but so much growth has happened too, which is really exciting. I was really involved in the Liberty Center and they've grown a lot. Like I've been volunteering back there and their whole space is different. So it's been really fun to be back and see all of that.
Well, we're glad you're back in town, and you're very astute in some of the things that you've recognized as being, changes, recognizable changes, and certainly housing is a challenge, and it has changed from, lots of single family to lots of apartments. And I don't see that changing. And in fact, there's more, being built right now, and I know there's more being planned after that. But there is still a need for single family homes. And, we're starting to see some redevelopment around Sacred Heart, particularly in that neighborhood where you have some nice, in some cases, big homes that are being redone. And that's a great trend. And I hope to see more of that. The fast food places, I think, speaks to our society. We live in a world of convenience, right? We want it now, we want it fast, we want it good. And so I think that's very astute too. And there has, the population of our city has remained fairly stable, yet our county continues to grow as more people kind of live in the suburbs and out on small acreages and things like that. So I think you're right on target with the changes that you've recognized. And so that's all good, right? We hope anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good things happening in the community for sure.
So you've been in education, you've been in counseling. What attracted you to the nonprofit sector?
Yeah, when I originally was in college, I thought I was going to be a speech language pathologist. I always love hearing about different people's career paths, but I was really interested in being in education. I wanted to be SLP for schools, and then I wanted to be a guidance counselor in the school systems. And education is still something very important to me. I think I consider myself a lifelong learner, and it's a high value of mine to constantly be learning and kind of cultivating curiosity. And what led me sort of to the nonprofit sector is there's kind of three different experiences. So I wanted to share those with you. The first is when I graduated from college, I did a post-grad volunteer year. So I think these are wonderful experiences. I did mine with the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. So I lived in Ashland, Montana, so rural Montana, and I worked with the Northern Cheyenne and Crow folks, and I was a house parent. And I think one of the things that Rockhurst kind of instilled in me, and I would say Sacred Heart and my faith in general, is what it means to serve others. And one of the mottos of the Jesuit education is men and women for and with others. And so I was really prompted to go and do this year of service. And of course, the theme of Jesuit Volunteer Corps is ruined for life because it sets you on a different path. It helps you think about things in a different way. And for me, it was an experience of what it meant to be the minority in a space and what it means when we build relationships across difference and we learn about people's experiences and stories that are different from our own. And so that got me thinking about, wow, there's a lot for me to learn beyond myself, right? About the world and about the needs. And so that was one experience that sort of, I would say, prompted me into a work in an area of service. So the nonprofit sector. The second I would say is I had an opportunity to work at a nonprofit called the St. Louis Arc out of St. Louis, and they support people with developmental disabilities. And I had a great title. I was the leisure support manager. I supported people in their leisure time and their fun time. And I got to work at a respite camp and with teenagers with disabilities. And again, I would say my takeaway was that at the baseline, many of our needs are the same for connection, for friendship, for meaningful work. These are things that every one of us needs in our lives. And to think about who maybe we've forgotten to consider in some of these things and how we work towards improving that for folks. So that was the second experience. And then the third was I went and got my master's in divinity at Boston College. And for me, this was a calling. This is a vocation and how I wanted to live out my faith and my values. I'm Catholic and Christian. And so gospel values of giving back and hospitality and community. And really, I feel like my mission is to love and serve the people of God and those around me. And so I'm always looking for ways to do that. So in many ways, it just became what kind of professional career, how can you support yourself to do the things that you love to do? And so that's what kind of led me into the nonprofit world and to really think about the needs of folks in our community and do my best to try to help work on this.
Well, it's perfect that you're here. helping in your own community where you grew up, giving back, and serving people through the United Way. So tell us about the United Way. What is it all about?
I've learned a lot about the United Way in the last year or so as I've discerned the job and then worked as the executive director here. So, first, I always like to talk about, I think, some things that people don't understand is sort of the breakdown of the national brand, right? And then the individual nonprofits. So, United Way Worldwide is a national brand. So, you might notice it, partnered with NFL and other big
Mhm.
brands. And so, it's actually an international brand. And so what that means is that we, as the United Way of Pettis County, are a member organization. So 99% of what comes in terms of money and resources to the United Way of Pettis County stays in Pettis County, but 1% goes to United Way Worldwide as our membership dues. And that gives me access to, resources and conferences and learning, and also to talk to people in other spaces to see what they're doing and how I might benefit from them. We have a shared vision at the United Way, which is really trying to bring together people and resources to meet the needs of our local communities. So that's a little bit a sort of big picture, right? And then United Way of Pettis County is we're our own nonprofit with our own local board members. And our impact areas are education, health, and financial stability. We actually began in 1963 as the United Fund, and it was kind of like a community chest model, right? So folks around Sedalia were saying, hey, I have a little bit more than I need. How about I come together with other people and I see other neighbors that might need some help? And so I'm going to pool my resources and give back, right? Kind of started then. It wasn't until 1974 that we joined United Way Worldwide, that we became United Way of Pettis County. And at that time, that's when we became a member organization and kind of joined together with the United Way mission. And it's similar in a lot of ways because part of what we do, right, is campaigns and bringing together resources and then giving out grants to local nonprofits. So that's a big part of what we do. And I would say that's consistent across the board. If you talk to any United Way, right, in the United States or beyond, they're pulling together some of those resources and then supporting local nonprofits in their area. I would say one thing that people may not know about the United Way is we do have our own programs. So things that we support, just getting ready to this Wednesday, we are collaborating with Katie Trail for a Set the Table event, which is helping people in the community to learn how to make nutritious meals with food pantry boxes. It's a lot of fun. So we try to collaborate. A big part of the United Way is the idea that united, when people come together from different sectors of our community, we can do more than working individually, right? And so whether that's collaborating with nonprofits or collaborating with other businesses or civic leaders, it's this idea that coming together, we can make a big impact. And so that's a little bit about what we do. There's a lot more I could say, but I'll kind of stop there. I think it's an organization for me that when I learned about how local it was, I was hooked. I was like, okay, this is a place that I can support, something I can get behind, because I think that needs in different communities change. And what we need here in Pettis County isn't what the folks in St. Louis or even the county over may need, right? And so it's nice to be able to focus on an area and say, what are the needs and how can we work to unite people to help those?
Well, and you said it earlier, to make big impact. And I think that is, a part of it that people really don't understand. And I'm glad that you talked about some of the programs that you guys are kind of driving that are outside the grants, because I think many people, if they've been giving to United Way over the years and they haven't been maybe current on the story, they continue to believe that, well, I give to United Way and then all of it goes out to all these different organizations throughout the community, which is a big part of what you do. And I want you to talk about that in a minute. But the fact that you're doing things on your own to drive improvements in education and health and financial stability and trying to have some impact in the community, I think that's a big part that I think people don't maybe fully understand. But so talk a little bit about the grants and how they work and some of the organizations that you touch through your work at United Way.
Yeah, absolutely. So the grants, how they work are that we have what we call funded partners. So these are nonprofits in the area that serve those in Pettis County, and any nonprofit can apply for these grants. So that's why sometimes when our sort of brochures comes come out every year that say these are our funded partners. Sometimes those shift based on people either applying or deciding not to apply. So those can change every year. You'll see the same nonprofits as well, which is great, but they apply kind of this time of year. And then they're awarded the grant for the following year. So in January, we kind of come out and say, here's our funded partners. So they apply through an application, and we have an allocations committee that reviews those. And we do our best to be really transparent about that project with the nonprofits. We had a couple of information sessions this year, and that was really great to be able to talk through, here's what it looks like. And because we want all the nonprofits to be able to get the grants and get support. And so when we announce those, what that means, if you're a funded partner, is that we fund you quarterly, so 4 times throughout that year for a specific program. And those programs, again, are going back to our impact areas on education, health, and financial stability. So as a nonprofit, you would apply for a specific program saying, hey, we need funds around doing this in the community with education, or this in the community with health. And so a couple of our funded partners that folks would probably know is the Sedalia Senior Center. We help fund them. As you know, they do some affordable meals for seniors. We also do the Boys and Girls Club. And those are examples, and Salvation Army as well. I give those examples because those are larger nonprofits that we support specific programs, right? So our funding is going towards something specific. They're a much larger organization. But we also have nonprofits that are completely volunteer run and led, and some of our funding is the majority of what their programming is, right? So we have the Association for Persons with Disabilities, who make sure that people and children get what they need to live more independently and help with education for those with disabilities. We also give to the Blind of Central Missouri, which helps those in the community who are blind or visually impaired build community, get to go to camps, get to have experiences that they otherwise might not have, and also have some adaptive equipment if they need it. I just pulled out a few examples, but there's some larger nonprofits, but then there's also some really small ones that rely heavily on what we do. The other one I like to kind of highlight, Cliff, because people ask me about it, is our work with Children's Mercy. So Children's Mercy is a grant recipient, and as people will say, it's not in Pettis County. So what's that about? Well, we have a relationship and a program that we run with them where our funding helps give any financial assistance to those who live in Pettis County that utilize Children's Mercy who can't afford to pay their bills. And last year we were able to cover 100% of the need, which, as you know, if you're in this community and you have a pretty sick kiddo, you're probably going to go to Children's Mercy. And, to get that letter that says, don't worry about this bill, it really helps with the financial stability of folks in our community. So I just like to highlight that too. So we're working a little creatively with them to make sure folks in our community have their needs met.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And I think people sometimes don't understand that, but that grant is serving people from here, even though the healthcare is being provided there, which is really, I think, very inventive. So how would you respond to the question of how are you different from other 501c3s?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Well, every 501c3 ideally has some sort of mission or vision that's holding them to what they're working on in a community, right? Meeting community need. And so I think what makes us different is a couple things. One is a lot of nonprofits are focused on a specific area of need, right? So maybe they're going to work with folks around housing needs, or they're going to work with folks around food needs, or they're going to work with folks, a specific population, right? Children, or those who are elderly, or right. And so I think what makes the United Way of Pettis County different is that it says its focus is the local community. So our idea is that it's really hard to know all of those things are important. So we try to be a place that says we want to support all of those things. And so sometimes, Cliff will say, you talked a little bit about this sort of idea of us being a pass-through organization. Like, well, you just give your money to United Way and it goes somewhere else, right? And so I do think we have some programs, and happy to talk more about that. But I also think one reason that folks have shared with me as to why they feel really good about giving to United Way is they can give $100, and that $100 can go to different communities of need in our local community, right? Who's to say what's more important, to support somebody getting what they need who has a disability, helping a senior get a meal, helping a child with some educational opportunities after school? Those are all important. And so you can give to one place and know it's going to various locations. So I think the fact that we give out grants does make us unique. And I also think the other thing that makes us unique is we have an intentionality towards collaboration. we believe we cannot do what we do without collaborating with others. And like I said, that's business folks, that's civic leaders, that's nonprofits. But if we're going to tackle something and if we're going to try to help a specific need in the community, there's a recognition that we're going to need a lot of different folks around a table to help meet that need and to build those relationships. So I also think that kind of makes us unique.
I would agree with that. So I think this is a good time to just take a pause. And hopefully by now, people are really interested in learning more and understanding how they can support the work that you're doing. So if they want to find out more, people go on the internet, right? What do they look for?
Yeah. So they can go to our website, which is pretty robust, www.spcuw.org. They can also go to our Facebook. I highly recommend following our Facebook page because most of what I do is post about local events. So if nothing else, you're going to see what's happening in the local area and get to support those things. So I would say that, of course, you can always reach out to me. So as the executive director, I always say if you email or call the United Way, you're going to get me. I'm the only paid employee of the United Way. We mostly run on volunteers and board members, which are incredible. But you can reach out to me and call me. A lot of folks do that, and I'm happy to do that. So 660-826-2980. And you'll also find my email on the website as well. But please reach out. I'm always happy to share. One of the things I've really been trying to do since I've come back, and part of it is post-COVID, is really get to meet with people in person, right? I'll come to your business or your church or organization and just share a little bit, get to meet you as well, hear about what you're doing, because a big part of what I want to do is support what other good work that's happening in the community. So it's helpful for me to learn as well.
I think that's a great approach. And I feel your passion just, through the podcast here, and it gets you excited about it. I think enthusiasm sells, so to speak. But so I know you probably wear, as the only employee, a bunch of different hats. Tell us about some of those hats. What are some of the roles that you play there?
Yeah, I have to just say it's one of my favorite parts of my job. I learned early on that variety of work is really life-giving for me. So I appreciate that about my role. So the first I would talk about is sort of the organization administration of what it takes to kind of run a nonprofit. So I spend some time doing that, and that's whether that be running some of our committees or making sure that we're organized in the things that we need to do and work on. The other thing I would say that I do a lot is volunteer coordinator. And I'm actually really comfortable with this role. I've done this in the past in a variety of different ways. So it's one of my favorite things to do, whether that be we do a day of action, which I know, Cal's had a team, but there's different folks come together and get to meet community needs on that day. So that's really fun. And we've started doing days of caring. So if a company or a church wants to continue to do volunteer work other than that day, they can talk to me and I'll work to essentially matchmake them with someone in need in our community. So that's been a lot of fun. I also get to do presentations and talk about what we do at the United Way and work on educating people around that. There's, those presentations are also sometimes around fundraising. I also get to serve on a lot of committees around town talking about some of the work that needs to be done, right? And giving of myself to those projects. I do a lot of volunteering in the local community because through that, I hear about what the needs are and what people are hoping for. So that's a little bit of what I do. I also love being able to respond to needs as they come up. So whether it's people reaching out, email or phone calls, I do my best to, what I would say is be a resource for connecting folks. People say, hey, I'm not sure where to go for this. And I say, did you know about X, Y, and Z, where you can, if we can't help, I do my best to make sure they're passed on to someone who can.
Back to collaboration, right?
Yes, it's true. It's what it really does make a community work for sure.
So, I know that you're out telling the story. How else are you marketing the United Way to the community? You mentioned certain things that you're doing. Are there other things that you're doing as well?
Yeah, so I guess I'll share a couple more of the things that I feel pretty proud that the United Way of Pettis County has been able to do. So one of those, you might have heard of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. And this is a national program, but it needs a local sponsor to come to an area. And most recently, the state of Missouri took this over in terms of funding it for everyone statewide, which is amazing. But we previously, for the last number of years, have been the supporter financially of bringing this program to children under the age of 5. They get a free book delivered to their home. And the United Way of Pettis County was sponsoring this program for the last few years. So the state of Missouri just took it over this month, but we will still be a collaborator with Sedalia 200 because they're moving it through the school system. So what that means is that I'll work on the back end to sort of advertise and make sure if any books need to be donated, we're doing those kinds of things. So I'll still be working on the program, but the state has the budget to pay for that worldwide, which is awesome. But before, when we were sort of running it about a month ago, I always like to share that because we kind of helped bring it to this community. And at the time I left, there was over 1,400 kids in Pettis County getting that, which is like 44% of the eligible population. So that was really cool. And I still think it's an amazing program. We're a big part of it. So that's something I like to share. The other thing that I like to share in terms of marketing, one thing, before I came into this role, I hadn't done a lot of fundraising. And I wasn't sure if that was going to be my niche. I was like, this will be interesting to see how this goes. But I think when I believe in something and I'm passionate about it, it's easy to talk about it. And it's easy to sort of invite people into that. And so one of the things I believe in the United Way is that it's about all of us saying our small yes, like all of us being able to give some of our time, talent, or treasure in whatever way we can to the mission of building up our community. And so I do it in that order because I think you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have people who show up for people, the sort of people power and neighbors helping neighbors and people doing the work of the programming, the nonprofits, it's not going to get you that far, right? And so I think if what you have is time and talent, I promise if you reach out, I will find a way to make sure that's used in the community. And I think the small yes of fundraising has been easy because one of the facts I like to share that I looked up is that, so the Pettis County, according to the US Census Bureau, has 16% of folks are at or below the poverty line. So there's some needs there. So if you take that group out of the equation, right, the Pettis County population is somewhere around 36,278, right, according to the US Census Bureau. If all of those people gave $50 a year to the United Way, we would have $1.8 million to give back to the community.
That's
I like to
amazing.
share, right? I like to share that because I'm not asking for people to give what they don't have. I'm not asking for that. I think what you can give goes a long way. And like I said, it makes big impact in our community. And so I like to break it down for people wherever I'm going to say, a small yes goes a long way, whether that small yes is volunteering to help your neighbor improve their home or their yard or whatever that looks like, or that small yes is giving $50 or whatever that is, it goes a long, long way. And so I always that's one way that I try to market it, is to help people understand the impact that we can all have when we work together.
I think that's a great way to look at it. So are they able to give online? Can they go onto your website? If somebody wants to give 50 or 100 or whatever today, they could go online and do that.
Yes. So you just go to www.spcuw.donate. You can also find it on our regular website. It'll just say donate in the corner and you can click on that too. You can also, I know folks like to be old school. I'm sometimes the same way. I like to send a check, so you can look at our address and mail a check, and sort of happy to give thanks to folks that way too. But however you want to donate. And I do want to say thank you to yourself and the many, many people over the years through workplace campaigns that have supported the United Way. It's a big deal. So I do my best to lead with gratitude.
I think that's a great way to do that. And, today is a very giving community. And really, I think rural America as a whole is very giving. We take care of each other. We care about our neighbors. We want to do what's right. So I think, we're all in a good place, and we need to make it as good as it possibly can. But certainly you have to have some challenges that you face in what you're doing. What would those be?
Yeah. So I think that part of the challenge right now, I would say, is the United Way of Pettis County has been, since I sort of came on, in a little bit of a rebuilding space. And so part of that was due to COVID, right? A lot of nonprofits not being able to go and visit people face to face and not being able to build those relationships took a little bit of a hit. And frankly, like I said, you can't give what you don't have. And so people were hurting in a particular way. And so that was a big part, I think, of the rebuilding space. And we've had some staff turnover, right? And so I think I agree with you. People in rural America are incredibly generous, but they're not going to give to what they don't know. And they're not going to give to somebody that they haven't met and they don't see and they don't trust and they don't understand what the work is about. And so I think my challenge has really been to get back those relationships, to start to meet people face to face, to start to get into the community in a variety of different ways, and a little bit of figuring out, how do I reach people? I think that, we've been fairly successful in working with, the media has been great, the local media, so newspaper and radio, folks like yourself, right? And also then social media in terms of Facebook. I think that's been fairly good. We've had some billboards, which has been great too. But I think it's hard to know exactly how will people hear about this, and what's the best way to disseminate information. So I'm still learning, and I think that is a challenge for me, sort of rebuilding some relationships, getting out there, and also knowing what's going to work. So I'm always looking for ideas. People have them, but I think it's mostly, again, just sort of rebuilding, getting a little stability, and then figuring out, okay, what are the needs of the community and how can I build some relationships?
Well, I think that's a great approach. So if somebody's out there listening, is there any other way that they can help that you haven't articulated today? Or maybe you just do it as a quick refresher summary of how can somebody help the United Way do what you do?
Yes, I am happy to share that. So again, if we break down in terms of giving, time, talent, treasure, those are the ways you can think about what you have to give. So your time, if you're a business owner or you're a part of any organization or church that is saying to yourself, I wish I could, volunteer. I wish I knew how I can make a difference in the community. You can form a team. It's called a Day of Caring team. And you just reach out and I'll send you the link, and you kind of tell me what your team is and what gifts they have. And then I work on partnering you with somebody in our community that needs that. Also, if you have a passion, we have as I mentioned, I'm the only paid employee, which means the United Way runs on volunteers. We have committees for events that we do. We have committees for projects. We have committees for the campaign and for Day of Action and different other things. So if you're a person that enjoys committee work or event planning or wants to give back that way, we could always use that. If you're a person in the community that has, I would say, like a hobby or a skill that you wish, like, oh man, maybe somebody in the community needs this, reach out. I think I have enough relationships in the nonprofit world that if you want to do X, like an example of this is someone said to me, oh man, I really love cooking. I love cooking. And I said, well, do you know about Community Cafe? You could cook for a lot of people, and they're like, oh, that's great. And they got connected, right? So those kinds of things, happy to make those connections. And of course, donate, right? If you have a little extra money and want to put it towards a good cause in our community, give where you live, right? That's the name of our campaign this year, to help people know it goes to our community. You can do that online. You can also do that through your workplace in a campaign. If you wanted to do it throughout, there's payroll deductions available in certain companies, but also you can do that with credit cards. So you could do $10 a month, right? Ongoing, and it just comes off your credit card. I do that to support some different things that I like to support as well. So those are ways that you could do it. I also want to say, if you are a small business leader out there listening right now in Pettis County, we have the I Pledge. So you could give one time as a business to the campaign, and I will make sure to thank you as much as I can in various ways. You'll get some good marketing and let people know that, you're invested and care about the community. So that's also an opportunity.
Lots of ways to help. Lots of ways to help. That's awesome. Well, I know with your background and experience and enthusiasm and approach, you're going to be highly successful. And we're happy that you're here, leading our organization into the future. So going back to you just a minute, because I always like to do a little research in these podcasts when I can. As a consumer living in rural America, right? How do you consume your media? Where do you go for information?
I will say, I think the various ways that folks do this convenient to me. You said that, right? So the reality is the billboards around town, they're hard not to see, right? You're sitting at a stoplight, you're consuming it that way. I do think that internet is also something, whether that be through people's websites or social media, it's a big way I stay in touch. And really, when I think of rural America and marketing, one of the things I think about is word of mouth and reputation. And, 9 times out of 10, if you're looking for something, you're going to ask your friends, you're going to ask your family, you're going to ask your neighbors, do you know anyone that does X? Right. And I think that I try to ask questions as much as I can to get a sense of what's going on in the community too. So I think word of mouth is also a way that I I kind of hear about what's going on in the community. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think folks are sitting around kind of talking about what's going on this weekend, or what is there if I have this specific need. And so I think people want to know how they can stay connected in that way. So that's another way I do that.
Yeah, I think those are all right on target. And there's nothing better than a referral from a family member or friend, right? And you've talked a lot about rural America. You've kind of woven it through the thread of our conversation this morning. And so, what else would you share about rural America? You left rural America and lived in cities in different parts of the United States. Now that you're back in rural America, what else can you share that might help people better understand the way we live, the kind of people that are here, et cetera?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always used to talk about when I was in different spaces and people would ask, what was it like to grow up in Sedalia? Is that it's because it's a small place and because you know folks, you have a capacity for relationship and getting to know one another that you can't really dismiss or ignore people. I mean, you can try maybe, but it's going to come back. And at the end of the day, what that means is that I think I learned how to work through disagreements or conflict, right? Or people that are just different, and to say, how do I want to build this relationship, and how can we find common ground, and how can we work together? And like you said, to take care of each other. So I think that actually, that small space leads you to get to know one another and leads towards a little bit more kindness, because I think sometimes when we're not kind to one another or dismissive of folks, it's because we're more separated, right? There's more layers that keep us separated. And so the closer we are together, the more that brings out, I think, the good in us. So I think that rural America does that. I also think it's a slower pace, and I'm really grateful for that. I think what it means to value family and value kind of slowing down and appreciating the gifts of nature, the gifts that playing a card game with four of your closest friends on a Friday and talking about your week, that it calls you to kind of slow down a little bit rather than be so fast paced, and I've really appreciated that. So I think that's another thing I think of when I think of rural America. And I think that one of the things that I've learned that I think I'll highlight, because I think a lot of people, it's like a myth, if you will, is that maybe there's not a lot of diversity. There's not a lot of different folks in rural America, but the reality is there's a lot. And I think that when you take time to get to know your neighbors, when you have that close knit community, when you run into the same people at church as you are in the store, as you are, right? There's a little bit of like, oh, hello, how are you? Like, I know a little bit more about who you are, and it makes it a little bit easier for us to connect and to care about one another. I like to think it brings out the best of folks.
I agree with that. That's great perspective, Rochelle. I appreciate you sharing all that. And that was in response to my open-ended question about rural America. But let's go even more open than that as we close here today. What else would you like to share with our Outdrive audience that you think they might find interesting or inspiring, maybe?
Yeah, I think my closing thoughts, I had two. One is that I believe that understanding and loving are intrinsically connected. And so I think we can only love folks as well as we understand them. And so I think the reason I share that is I think it encourages all of us to ask questions of folks that maybe we may not know the answers to get a little curious, and to know that I believe that I have something to learn from everyone that I interact with, that their eyes and their perspective is different than my own, and therefore there's always learning available. And so I think everyone is needed. I guess that's the other thing I would share. I think one of the things I used to tell college students when I worked with them is they would say, that's not the way the world works, right? Kind of seeing me through an optimistic lens, and they're like, oh, Rochelle, that's not the way the world works. And I love to say to them, oh, we make the world work. We as humans set up the world to work. And so if we don't think something's working, we can change it to work differently. And what I say that because I think it's empowering. I think it reminds us, and especially in a small place, if you hear nothing else from me, hear thank you. Thank you to all that you do for your neighbors, for your friends, to build the community up, because it cannot happen without each and every one of us giving what we have. And I think that everyone is needed. I believe that everyone is needed, and it takes all of us to give a little bit. And I'm really, really grateful for all that everyone gives. So thanks.
We're grateful for you. That's very insightful. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Cliff. This has been a real pleasure and a great addition to my day. And it's been just a real delight to be able to share a little bit and to be able to meet you. So thank you.
Thank you. Folks, thanks for listening to Outdrive. I hope you've enjoyed our visit today with Rachelle Simon, Executive Director of the United Way of Pettis County. Come back again next week, and I'll take you down the roads of rural America, where it is heaven on earth.
Thanks for taking a ride with us on Outdrive. This episode is complete, so head on over to ecalis.com for more insight you can apply to help drive your business growth. And be sure to sign up for our free monthly e-letter, Outthink, for even more helpful content about marketing to rural America. Have a great day and keep on driving.